Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're talking with Jane Boon about her experience when she was a teenager with car parts mogul Frank Stronach. So, Jane, you'd left off the story talking about you have just gotten in the car with Mr. Stronach and you're making your way, the two of you, to the guest house, the Magna guest house in Gormley. What happened next?
So we arrive and we climb the stairs to the master bedroom, and then we have sex. And, he never asked me, is this something you want? I never said no. I never said yes. I was incredulous. It was not the sort of thing that had ever happened to me before. I was just sort of baffled by the experience of seeing the man who had hired me naked. It was just so beyond the frame of reference I'd ever had at that stage.
So,
And
was this consensual? Would you describe it as consensual?
by the standards of today, where we want an enthusiastic yes, absolutely not. By the standards of 1986, when you had to say no and fight for it to be a rape, I didn't do that. So what was it? I was acquiescent. I was incredulous. I was just waiting for it to be over. So in the parlance of the era, it was a really bad night. And then that was it. He left, presumably to return to his home and to his wife. And I was left lying in the bed in this fabulous guest house going, what on earth am I going to do now? Because there were people that had seen me leave with him. Are they all going to think that I'm the kind of woman who has sex with the CEO? Am I one of those awful women who has sex with the boss? I mean, that was a villain of the movies at that time. I was a very serious student. I got A's in like the hardest classes in engineering school. I was not that girl. And all of a sudden that role had been thrust upon me, and it wasn't one I planned, but I was just sort of forced to adapt.
So
And
what happened next with this internship and this scholarship? Because I presumably you were still an employee or a co-op student with Magna.
So I sort of, as I was lying there, I took a very cold look at my future, and I said, well, if I raise an issue about this, if I go talk to HR, I'm the one with the problem, because what just happened? He's the founder, he's the owner, he's like the top guy. I'd be the one to leave. And so I decided just to keep my mouth shut, because the stakes were so high for me personally, because I was 2 years into a program that was very particular. None of my credits would have transferred anywhere. I would have had to start over in an engineering school somewhere else. And then I would have to answer the question, what happened at Magna? Because that would be, a specter looming over my CV and my professional reputation right from the start. And let's face it, to leave a program like mine, there are really only two options: that I'd freaked out or that I'd flunked out. And neither was the case. So I just decided to avoid him for the next 2.5 years of my life. And let me tell you, it's not that hard to avoid a CEO if you want to, especially if you're as junior as I was. You hide in the bathroom, you just make yourself scarce, and you hardly have to see the guy. And so that's what I did.
So one of the things that stood out to me in the column that you wrote was you talked about this, what you described as an infrastructure around Mr. Stronach that made all of this possible. We've got about a minute and a half left. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Well, I'm a systems engineer by training, so I see the systems. So he would not have been able to get me a loan if he didn't have the driver, which I suspect Magna supplied, if he didn't have the corporate guest house, once again, that Magna owned, that was located at a corporate park that they had for employee amusement. The executive assistant need to know that it was available, and then tell me it was great. So that was another asset.
Do you think the people around you that night knew what was going on?
In retrospect, absolutely. Because he had a reputation as a womanizer. So I don't know if they imagine it was anything really untoward. I think I was just, the flavor of the evening, and they were just sort of rolling their eyes. Oh God, there's Frank being Frank again, if they thought about it at all. But
Even though
what was
you seemed to not know what was coming.
I I had no clue. But like, what was that house doing empty? It was a big night with out of
Mhm.
town guests. What was that house doing empty? It was just crazy that there were all of these things. What was the driver doing,
Yeah.
able to find my car and
Right.
get it home?
We've got to go to break, but we'll be right back.